week we spent some time on mapping those things, identifying the purpose and who you want to become in the process. And so I think traditionally you've been thinking about, or you probably come across SMART goals. I think a number of people still talk about them. The thing with the SMART goals, I think first of all, the acronym, they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And that's a little bit the approach traditionally when it comes to goal setting. However, what happens is that there's something that's basically missing. And before we move on to what's actually missing, by way of background, this SMART goal setting was set up back in the 50s by General Electric. And so there the idea was to understand how you can get people more productive and to basically free time for the middle management. So people basically at the bottom could produce more. And so it's basically back in the 50s. But here I think the idea is really to start with clarity. Likewise, if you have, don't know if you can relate to this and maybe give an example, is when you're planning something you're excited about, what you're going to be doing. You don't know yet how you're going to be doing it. But the idea is that because you have this clear goal, it suddenly everything falls into place. And even if you come across challenges, it's not a big issue because you know the wider purposes. So maybe if that resonates with you, do you want to share maybe a personal story, Domenico or Nikita? Anything that comes to mind?
I think, I would say when you specifically at work, when
Mhm.
you set goals and you try to figure out a path to achieve those goals, sometimes we underestimate a bit as well, let's say, the component of external factors, which
Mhm.
sometimes is an excuse for
Mhm.
us to not achieve the goal. But I think sometimes you have to take into account as well the side points. And I think embedding it also a strategy how to manage these external factors is also a way to achieve those goals, because I would say 90% can be in our control, but the 10% can affect the endpoint, right? So I think a way to structure it, I agree with the point of having a clear path where you want to achieve, but also you need to consider what can affect externally your goals
Yeah.
and what's the so that's my take, let's say. But
Yeah.
and on the measurability point,
Mhm.
I strongly agree, because I struggled in the past with the fact that you achieve the goals, yes.
Mhm.
How do you prove that is the hard part sometimes.
Mhm.
So
But I think the point here is also that what you're mentioning here is yes, considering the wider environment. However,
mhm,
often what happens is that you don't have any control over that. And the other thing, and that you also looked at last week, is that basically whatever you focus on, you're going to achieve it. So
mhm,
if you start thinking about all the risks, and
mhm.
maybe there, that's also the professional aspect to it, maybe
Yeah,
to
the
play.
mindset.
What's happening is that whatever you focus on, your energy is going to flow towards that. So it's the same
Mhm,
thing. If you're taking a turn with a car, if you start thinking, well, I'm turning, but I'm going to hit the wall on the other side, what's going to happen is that you're going to turn your head, you're going to look at the wall, and then eventually
mhm.
you're just going to aim for it, as opposed to,
Yeah.
taking that turn. And so here, the
Mhm,
really the encouragement is to say, let's be bold, let's be excited about something, and life will happen anyway, and there's something that's going to come my way. But the element here of excitement and determination will also help you to go above that. Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. Cool. Mikita, any comments, reflections? No, not yet.
No,
Maybe.
I think it's good. It's just
Mhm.
think obviously it depends on the personal goals, but it also
Mhm.
depends on other people a lot as well.
Mhm.
So I think this, at least for me, it's more and more important, let's say, because again, probably it would be covered in the presentation later on, but for me, it's always that the goals that, for instance, we want to achieve,
Mhm.
even the personal perspective, it's more and more dependent on other people as well. Your presentation as well, it should be like, for instance, training of the people. So,
And just a little recap actually for you guys, what we looked at last week is you basically have a purpose statement. If you think about where are you going, where the end of your life, basically, and without being too morbid, but just realizing that if there's one thing for sure is that probably in 100 years from now, we won't be here. The question is, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to leave behind? And tapping into that deeper aspect of yourself, of your personality, is also going to help drive a number of things. And that's going to basically, and then that's what we did last week, was to look into, once you have your purpose statement, look at what does your goal look like 10 years from now. So say, I don't know, you're 32 or 35. When you're 45 years old, what does your life look like from all different aspects? From a social aspect, in terms of friends, in terms of your connection to the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. And likewise, family-wise, athletic, and financially. And then what happens is that you then go back in time and you look at, if I want to achieve X, what are basically the steps I need to go through to achieve that? And of course, this is something you adjust along the way, but then you go back to 1 year, and then of course you consider the starting point, because that's like let's say you're aiming to become a partner or become a managing director at a big company. It's not going to happen overnight. It might take 5 years, it might take 10 years. Question is, what are the steps that you need to go through in order to be there? And so as a result, what you're going to be aiming for a year from now, 5 years from now, is going to be driven by that. Does that make sense? And then
Absolutely.
And then afterwards, you go back to what does the annual goals look like? What do the quarterly goals look like, etc. And so if we focus on 1 year, what would that look like? What would be different? What would be different in your career? What would be different in your personal life? And so that's really the question. So the first step in the goal setting is really think about where you are now, and for instance, where you want to be, say, a year from now. And doing that imagination work, thinking there's no limit to your imagination. Because often, and that's probably the trap we all fall into, is what about if this happened, if this happens, if this happened? You can consider it, but you should really focus on the piece that excites you the most. And so there are two types of goals. There's the habits goals, and then there's the achievement goals. And the difference is basically the achievement goal is going to produce a specific outcome. I want to X, I want to be Y. Or say, for instance, another goal could be, I want to go to this place, I want to write a book. That's really the achievement. On the other side, if you think, I want to complete a marathon, what are the habits that I need to put in place to get there? And then you go back to, maybe I need to start thinking about buying a pair of shoes. I don't have a pair of shoes. I need to start planning that I need to run every other day, for instance. And so those are two key aspects. Is it an achievement goal that you're aiming for, or is it a habit? And habit goals. Yeah, and so what happens with habit goals is that it produces new behavior, because that's also the idea behind learning. If you just have knowledge, but basically you don't apply and you don't change your way of doing things, that remains knowledge. So learning implies that you're doing something new. And so what does that new behavior look like? It could be, for instance, I'm going to be walking every day. I'm going to eat differently. I'm going to save a certain amount of cash. Both have an outcome, but the difference is that the habit doesn't stop. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think when you think about habits and you think about changing behaviors, I think the first goal is actually to change the habits or to build new ones.
Exactly.
So and I think sometimes it's the hardest step, because of course at some point they will become instruments. So the habits will become instruments, and in the end a way to achieve the goal. But then if you think about the habits as the goal at first, I think at least it is helping me a bit to construct it that way. So the fact that I walk now every day, it's just to be able to do the 5-10K that I want to do in a month, 3 months. But the first goal was actually to walk every day. Yeah. But then in the end, if you think about step by step, if you think about, I just want to run the 10K, then it was very difficult for me to get there without having these steps in the middle. And I think they seem the smallest one, but they are the hardest one. As I spoke to you also last week, I think the first, when you wear the training shoes or when you wear the running shoes, is the first accomplishment, and it's the hardest one.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing as well that comes to mind is a prompt I sometimes use is it's linked to some extent when you're creating your goal. It's an interesting prompt thinking. If you were the smartest person in the world, what would you tell yourself to do? Because that's going to drive you the standard and is going to push you to think in a different way. And that can also be an idea in terms of if you feel limited in terms of creating those goals, that's a prompt that really helped me. And then achieving a new outcome, habits, new positive behavior. So I think we're going to spend the next 5 minutes now thinking about what do you want? What does life look like? Be precise and give a number. Say we can work on this, say probably like a year from now or 2 years from now, to think about something that either a new habit that you want to create or a new achievement. And so try to get almost to feel it and give as much detail as you can. And so here we have SMART-3 goals. So if we disregard a little bit this idea from the 50s, here the idea is still to be specific, but we have, I think the main difference here is that we have milestones, for instance, which are rocks, right? But it can be 90 days from now, it can be every quarter. And what happens with those milestones is that because you set that target, that time, the idea then is to reverse engineer it. So say, for instance, you want to get to, just picking up on your goal, for instance, Mikita, or even you, Domenico, I want to be meditating for 20 minutes. How does that look if I then reverse engineer it back to today? And what Domenico is doing as well, I want to be running 10K. I want it to feel good. What does it look like if I track back to now? And what does the progress look like? And then you can even start playing around with what does it look like weekly and maybe almost daily. And the other piece, is then action steps. So it needs to be bite size, simple and small, so it's easy. And if you read the book, forgot now the guy who mentioned who's all about the habit book. But if you want to start a new habit, it really needs to be something that is easy and that is really actionable. And then the last piece is risky. It needs to be an element of risk, because what happens is that when you're starting something new, there's always a little bit something at risk. Either you of maybe losing, for instance, as small as it can be, right? As you mentioned, Mikita, I want to maybe sleep less. So in the morning, I can wake up and do meditation. So let's say sleeping is at risk, but it's kind of a trade-off that you need to have. And yeah, just in terms of the risk, there was a study done where there were two groups of people. One group who set goals that were achievable, and then another group who included element of risk, say in terms of the goal that they had. So in case they didn't make it. And likewise, maybe a goal can either might be losing something or is going to be harder to achieve, but there's an element really of uncontrollable, but it's not something like tonight I'm going to go to bed. It's not something that is easy to achieve. And so the outcome of the study is, well, maybe the question first for you is, who do you believe got the best satisfaction out of setting a goal that is achievable and getting it, or the group who included risk in terms of achieving a goal?
Sorry,
That's
I
okay.
don't know what happened. So you were saying goal that is achievable versus goal that we have something at risk,
Exactly.
right? And which one got the best satisfaction?
Exactly. So
I think you get more satisfied in general as a human being when there is something at risk, right? Meaning that you get more satisfaction where you achieve something which is greater than what you think is achievable.
And so absolutely, that was the outcome. The thing is that the first group who set goals that were achievable, 80% of them achieved their goals. The interesting piece is that even though they achieved their goals, the level of satisfaction was about 70%. And then on the one group that set goals that were riskier, only 45% of them achieved their goals, but 100% felt satisfied. So what it tells us is that a certain level of discomfort is required. And if you think about the hero's journey, there's first the idea of setting yourself on a journey. Then you go across a number of challenges and discomfort. And then along the way, as you start seeing things more clearly, you start letting go of some things, confronting some of them possibly, and then you come back with a lesson learned and having grown. So good. So in terms of the so we looked at specific, those being milestones, what does that look like? And then retracing back, reverse engineering, and what all the little steps then I can take to get there and the importance of risk. And then of course there's a time key element, how many days. I think the key one here, if you look at the added letter compared to SMART, is how can you make it exciting? Good for you goals are probably not maybe something that's exciting enough. So the idea is to really attach something that you love to make it really something that you enjoy. Likewise, you can do something in terms of your goals is to also just give yourself a little reward once you've achieved those steps. Because that's something happen often is that you set those big goals and it's impossible to enjoy the journey because you think, gosh, it's just so hard. And the only thing you think about is that you're not there yet. So the idea is the same way that you build those little steps, you can build little rewards. So it can be, I'll go and grab a coffee at my favorite coffee place, or once I've achieved that goal, I will then, as a result, I don't know, take, a loved one for dinner or something like that. And rewarding, even though you haven't achieved it, but at least acknowledging the effort. Because what happens otherwise is that when you set yourself a big goal, which can be, say, 5 years from now, 3 years from now, you basically just get tired and you run out of stamina. And that's something we'll also look at next week with the energy management, is looking at, after looking at your entire life, bringing it back to years and then goal setting over a year. Then the idea is if you then zoom in on your day, what does it look like to manage your energy throughout the day? And then the added second R here is relevance. So if you think about the wider goals, the wider purpose, the one that really make you feel warm inside and really go deep, that's going to create alignment. And likewise, in term ecology is the idea is if you think about an ecosystem, you have a number of living organisms inside. So you have humans, you have nature. How does that relevance is included at the scale of your life, of course, not talking about nature here, but how does that work into the wider piece? And say if I'm divorced, I have my two daughters here. If I say I just want to move outside of the country, how's that going to work in terms of my existing system? Is that going to create harmony, or is it just going to create more tension and break something that I actually really care about and that is aligned to, for instance, the family goal that I have? And also sometimes I think when you think about whether it's relevant, it's also acknowledging that it might not be the right time for something to happen. And then the last one is your why. And so here there's a little saying that I like is when you lose your why, you lose your way. And another point I think that's interesting here is that even though we made the difference between goals, achievements, and habitual goals, the important thing here is to be married to the goal, not the way. So to basically allow yourself to try, fail, adjust, basically learn, and then afterwards keep the goal in mind, whatever that goal is. Because that's often what happens is that you can set yourself up saying, I want to run a marathon. But because you didn't consider maybe enough, for instance, the relevance, the ecosystem, etc., the amount of work that you have to do, and so you end up injured. The question is, if you don't adjust, you'll keep having the same results. So here the idea is to think, I really want this goal because it resonates with me, with my why, really deep. However, I might have to adjust along the way. So, and then that's the key thing, is that if you understand the why, you'll figure out the how. Does that resonate with you guys?
I have actually one question to
Sure.
the previous slide, because I think what you mentioned, is it different for the goals that are more habits and more achievement? Because I think for the goal habits, actually the way probably a bit more important. Because for instance, if you want to walk, you just walk it the way. But all these parts that, for instance, you need to complete 10K per day, it's more like goal. I think for this type of the goals, it's probably less relevant.
So what is the question then?
So if you go, I think it's on the next slide. It's about to be married to the goal and not the way. So I
Yeah.
think it really depends on the goal. If it's goal
Mhm.
more like habit or goal more like achievement. Because for me, for instance, when I'm reading and I'm thinking in mind that, for instance, anything connected to like goal like a habit that you
Mhm.
should do every day without seeing sometimes results,
Mhm.
it's more like you being married more to the way that you just do something every day, but actually you might not see outcome for a really long time. So you're
Yeah.
more married to the way than to the goal itself.
And what happens then if you're married to the way and not the goal?
I think, because this is what I'm saying, I think it
Yeah.
really depends on the type of the goal. Because, for instance,
Mhm.
if you set yourself that you need to do, let's say, goal is to do 10K per day, and this is
Mhm.
the goal, and you just married to this, then I think it becomes too stressful because sometimes goal is too low, sometimes it's too high, and things like this.
Yeah. And that's a little bit the idea when you're writing your goal. What's the
Sure,
why behind it?
correct.
Because the other thing, and that's something we covered in the first module, is about the psychology of selves. Is that
Mm-hmm.
if you basically there's amongst the top sub personalities that we have, there's one called the pusher, where you push yourself, push. There's an element required of pushing yourself. The thing is that if you keep heading, if your head keeps running into a brick wall and it's not working, maybe that's not the right goal for you.
Sure.
But I agree. I agree with you, Mickey. I hear what you're saying. Meaning sometimes you do not have you can lose perspective and then say I'm doing this and this. Why I'm doing this? I think the concept of you have that goal still fulfills this habit and this
Yeah.
way. But then on the other side, I also agree with what Albin says, because if I cannot walk for 2 days in a row, that's my way, right? To the goal. It's not the goal. It's my way to the goal. And if I cannot walk for 2 days in a row, it does not mean that I do not have the goal anymore. I have to be flexible and I need to find a
For sure.
way, other way potentially to go there. But if I'm too married to the way, I say, no, I have not done this 2 days in a row. And then there is no way I will achieve the goal.
No, makes sense.
I think that's the tricky part, but I hear you.
Cool. And I think
But
what
I
makes it,
mean, there was also an interesting thing that I
yeah.
noticed before, which is this conflict of goals versus setup. Sometimes I believe that in order to achieve a goal, depending on the goal, you have to destroy a bit as well the setup and potentially create some discomfort to yourself, but potentially also to people around you. But really depends on the final outcome, I think. Because sometimes it's in the very short term could be beneficial to destroy an habit, which is not good. Which can be, I want to be with this person, but I
Mhm.
need to do this 6 months away from this person
Mhm.
because it can be your partner, your wife, or whoever. Because I think that also together we can be better in 1 year if I do
Mhm.
this away 6 months, but it's a disruption in 6 months. Thinking about it work-wise can be a secondment outside the country or an experience where you will feel better also in terms of understanding if you want to really stay with this person. To me, it happened. It went the other way around because I was in a relationship when I was back in Italy, and then I came to Luxembourg, and then I was already in a distant relationship before. And then I understand that this was not the way I wanted to have it. And then it helped me, but it was also a way to see the other way, right? So what if I really understand and I want to continue this relationship? I will probably come back. So, and it destroyed a bit the habit of the comfort zone of where I was, right? So I think that there are sometimes those goals that are set up in which you have to destroy your current harmony, I would say. But in that aspect, I agree with you, Alvin. You need to look more at the medium long term, where you say this is gonna benefit or not, what I really want to in the medium term, yes or no.
Yeah, and then another angle to look at it is also what if you're taking something that is a goal that is quite dramatic or that causes a lot of drama, is what role are you playing here? You know, are you
Yeah.
trying to play the victim, the villain, the hero? And that's also the thing with relationships, is that a major theme in relationship is drama. And what drama are you what patterns are you getting into? And so that's kind of an invitation as well to how conscious are you about your own way of thinking and decision making. So sorry. So there's a lot to cover. So cool. Just conscious of time, there's another little exercise that I love you guys to do. I'll just share again my screen. So I'm just emphasizing here to reward yourself, whether it's big or small. As I mentioned, you can take taking someone to the restaurant or even going on your own if you fancy that, and take a minute basically to live and to realize I cannot just always be looking at the future. It's super important to have a driver to make the actions that you're taking meaningful, but you shouldn't always be living in the future. Cool. So let's do a little exercise where you can create at least one annual Smartery goal, annual goals that you can have. And challenge, don't make them all about your career, but be as wide as you can. And of course, remembering the structure and describing them, thinking, is it an achievement or is it a habit? And identify your top 3 whys for the goal as well. So for each goal that you're going to have is, why do you want this? So
Good.
Yeah, good. Well, thank
Sounds
you
good.
guys for
Yeah.
joining.
Thanks a lot, Mikita, Alvin.
Thanks a lot, Alvin.
Yeah.
And have a great weekend when it comes.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Same to you.